The vacuum of space was a graveyard, and Jack Thorne was its undertaker. His ship, the Vagabond, slipped through the orbital wreckage field with the silence of a shark. Below him, the planet Delta 49 rotted. It was a sphere of rust, gray dust, and the skeletal remains of a war that had burned itself out decades ago. Jack made his living here, in the high orbit where two empires had torn each other to scrap. He was an ex-soldier, now just a mechanic, and this graveyard was his paycheck. He sipped stale coffee, his eyes scanning the sensor suite. His ship's AI, a dry, dispassionate voice he'd nicknamed Sal, kept a running inventory of the junk. Titanium-grade hull fragment bearing 003, estimated value 1,200 credits. Cardassian power coil, bearing 005, value negligible. Tag the hull fragment, Sal. Ignore the coil, Jack muttered, his voice rough from disuse. He was guiding the Vagabond's external arms toward the chunk of metal when a new signal pinged. It was faint. Warning, Sal interrupted. Unidentified energy signature detected. Source, collapsing compound, quadrant 4. Kinetic analysis predicts total structural failure in approximately 12 minutes. Jack leaned forward, wiping grime from the console screen. Energy? Not just residual heat? Affirmative. A biological heat signature. Faint. Life support is failing. Protocol violation, Jack, Sal stated flatly. That sector is salvage voided. Inheritor territory. The inheritors can send me a bill, Jack said. He swung the Vagabond around, its thrusters firing hot against the cold void. I'm going in. Keep the engines hot. The compound was a twisted mass of black metal, vomiting plasma from a ruptured core. He docked at a shattered emergency airlock, the ship groaning as debris scraped its hull. He sealed his helmet, the hiss of recycled air filling his ears, and forced the lock. Inside, the air was poisonous. Gravity was intermittent, flickering on and off. Fire licked down a long corridor, feeding on pressurized oxygen from ruptured tanks. He moved fast, his heavy boots magnetized to the deck plating. He was a ghost in his own right, navigating a tomb. He followed the signal to what looked like a laboratory. The room was destroyed. Stasis pods had been shattered, their fluid frozen into strange, glittering sculptures in the vacuum. And in the center of the room, tangled in a mess of coolant lines and a collapsed support beam, was a figure. It was a girl, or the remains of one. She was alien, that much was clear. Her suit was torn, and her skin was a pale, almost luminous blue. She was unconscious, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Half of her body was covered in severe, chemical-looking burns. He knelt, pushing aside a sparking wire. A small data slate was attached to the wreckage of her pod, its screen flickering against the flames. Jack wiped the soot from it. Specimen Zeta. Status, worthless. Biovalue, nil. Disposal authorized. Jack stared at the words. Worthless. He felt a cold, familiar anger tighten his jaw. He hated that word. He hated the kind of power that used it. Jack, structural integrity at 30%. Sal buzzed in his helmet. You have 4 minutes. Working on it. He activated the plasma cutter on his wrist gauntlet and began slicing through the cables pinning her. He worked fast, the blue-white flame of the cutter reflecting in his visor. The girl stirred, a low moan escaping her. He cut the last restraint and moved to lift her. As he did, a secondary explosion rocked the room. A piece of jagged shrapnel, white-hot from the blast, flew across the lab. It missed Jack but sliced across the girl's outstretched arm, tearing her suit and the flesh beneath. Her blood, a deep, iridescent violet, sprayed out, It spattered the composite plating of Jack's forearm gauntlet. The metal hissed, smoked. Jack shouted as the blood ate through the armor in an instant, splashing onto his bare skin beneath. The pain was immediate. It was not a burn. It was a deconstruction. He felt the alien liquid boil his flesh at a molecular level, searing itself into him. He grit his teeth, the smell of his own charred skin filling his helmet. But he did not drop her. He hoisted her over his shoulder, his arm screaming in agony, and ran. He ran as the deck plating fell away behind him, revealing the black maw of space. He ran as fire chased his heels, and he launched himself through the airlock, sealing it just as the entire compound folded in on itself, imploding in a silent final collapse. He threw the girl into the co-pilot's acceleration couch, strapping her in with one hand. He dove for the controls, his left arm useless, the pain a white-hot nova. The vagabond ripped free of the debris field, its engines burning hard for the jump point. Only when they were clear, floating in the safe. Black dark, did Jack look at his arm. The alien blood had cooled. It had left a permanent mark, a swirling, intricate scar that looked like a nebula burned directly into his skin. The Mojave Desert was quiet, save for the hum of Jack's aging fusion generator. His hangar was a massive, corrugated steel bubble half buried in the red sand, smelling of grease, hot metal, and old coffee. He'd been back on Earth for 3 days. The girl was on a cot in the corner. He'd plugged her into his old military auto dock, a machine that had seen better days but still functioned. It whirred, pumping her full of synthesized nutrients, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and stabilizers. He had cleaned her. The burns were worse than he thought, covering nearly half her face and torso. The fire had left her a ruin, but the other half of her, the unburned half, was flawless. Her skin was smooth alabaster, her features sharp and elegant, her hair the color of spun moonlight. She was a broken statue, half perfection, half disaster. Jack was welding a new armor plate onto his gauntlet, the scar on his arm itching beneath the synth skin bandage, when he heard a gasp. He shut off the welder, the sudden silence deafening. Her eyes snapped open. One was a clear, piercing sapphire blue. The other was clouded, the sclera fused with scar tissue. She sat bolt upright, ripping the IVs and monitors from her body. Where? Her voice was a low rasp, guttural and thick with an accent he couldn't place. She scanned the hangar, the tools, the junk parts, the looming silhouette of the vagabond, the blinding white desert visible through the open bay door. This place, what is it? Easy, Jack said, raising his hands slowly. He kept his voice calm. You're on Earth, my hangar. You're safe. Safe, she repeated. The words sounded like a curse. She slid off the cot. She was unsteady, but she forced herself to stand, her posture unnaturally rigid, her eyes fixed on him. You, the scavenger, you will kneel. Jack stopped. He raised an eyebrow. I'll what now? Kneel. Her good eyes narrowed. You will kneel before the blood, before the royal daughter of the Corinthian line. Jack stared at her for a long second. The frail, half-burned girl demanded fealty. He couldn't help it. A short, dry chuckle escaped him. He turned, walked to his small kitchen unit, and grabbed a vacuum-sealed packet of instant ramen noodles. He tossed it to her. She caught it instinctively, her reflexes whipped fast. I don't kneel, sweetheart, not for anyone. But I got noodles, Jack said. Welcome to the desert. Eat up. She looked at the colorful packet, then at him. Her expression, already hard, crystallized into pure, unadulterated hatred. You mock me. I will have your tongue for this. Get in line, Jack said, turning his back to her to pick up his welder. I'm calling you firecracker. And if you try to gut me, I'm taking the noodles back. The tension in the hangar became a physical thing, thick and metallic. For 2 days, she sat on the cot, her silence a weapon. She refused the food, refused the water. She just watched him. She watched him repair his ship, clean his tools, and trace the strange new scar on his arm. He could feel her gaze on his back, a cold pressure that never wavered. He'd seen that look before, in stabilization camps on Cygnus Prime. It was the look of a predator, cornered and wounded, waiting for the precise moment to strike. He was working on the vagabond's primary injector, his back to her, when she finally moved. She was fast, faster than any human, even weakened and starved. He heard the scrape of the cot, the whisper of bare feet on the dusty concrete. He spun, tools dropping from his hand, but she was already at the main hangar door, fumbling with the heavy manual release latch. She wasn't trying to be quiet. She was desperate. "Hey!" he yelled. She slammed her small fists against the heavy steel, a guttural scream of pure frustration tearing from her throat. The door didn't budge. She hit it again, and then, suddenly, she stopped. A choked sound, half sob, half gasp. She arched her back, a violent, unnatural spasm. Her fingers clawed at her own spine, and she collapsed onto the concrete, convulsing. Jack crossed the hangar in 3 strides. "Firecracker!" He knelt, rolling her over. Her face was pale, slick with sweat. The hatred was gone, replaced by pure agony. What is it, your burns?" he asked, his hands hovering, unsure where to touch. She shook her head, biting her lip so hard her own violet blood welled at the corner of her mouth. "My back. It burns. It burns." He gently turned her, lifting the back of the medical tunic he'd given her. His stomach clenched, bolted directly to her vertebrae, disappearing under the skin in a mess of inflamed tissue, was a network of metallic implants. They were not sleek. They were not medical. They were thick, brutal pieces of hardware pulsing with a faint, sickly green light. He recognized the tech, Council of Inheritors, standard issue. "Gods," Jack whispered. It was a neural leash, a control device. "They didn't just dump you," he said, his voice grim. "They shackled you." He carried her back to the cot. The spasm had passed, leaving her weak and trembling. He brought her a cup of water. This time, she drank. The collapse had shattered her fragile pride. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, the alien desert night casting long, cold shadows into the hangar. "They will kill you," she whispered. Her English was clearer now, as if the pain had burned away the confusion. "They will kill you for touching me." "Who's they?" Jack asked. He sat on a crate opposite her, cleaning his scarred arm. The burn still itched, a constant reminder. "The Council of Inheritors. My family." She spat the word. "They discarded me. Why?" Jack kept his tone level. "Why go to all the trouble of flying you to a war zone to dump you in a collapsing building?" "I was imperfect," she said, her voice hollow. She touched her scarred face. This was not the fire. This was birth. They tried to fix me, to make the blood pure." She looked away, out at the dark sand. "They failed. My biology, it rejected their corrections. So they tried to erase me. The fire was meant to be my grave." She finally met his gaze. Her one good eye held a terrifying depth of old, cold pain. "My name is Larina, and by saving me, by carrying me, you have declared war against the only true power in the stars." "Great," Jack said, tossing his cleaning rag aside. He stood up. "Well, war it is. I was getting bored anyway." "You do not understand," she hissed, scrambling to her feet. She was unsteady, but her voice was strong. They do not lose. They are the blood truth. They will burn this entire world to reclaim their property. I'm not their property, Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. And neither are you. Not anymore. He saw the shift in her eyes then. The fear and the anger receded, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. She had tried royal authority. She had tried threats. Now, she would try the only other weapon they had left her. The air in the hangar changed. It grew warmer. The dry smell of oil and sand was suddenly, inexplicably overpowered by something else. A heavy, sweet, and primal scent, like ozone and night-blooming jasmine. A low vibration started, almost too low to hear, but Jack felt it in his teeth, a thrumming that seemed to come from her. Lyrena stepped toward him. She moved with a liquid, hypnotic grace that belied her injuries. She kept her scarred side turned away from him, a calculated presentation of her unblemished half. The flawless skin, the perfect sapphire eye. Her voice dropped, losing its broken edges, becoming a resonant, hypnotic melody. You are strong, a Terran. I did not know your kind had such strength. She was close now, close enough for him to feel the heat radiating from her skin. The air was thick, humid. They hurt me, she whispered. You healed me. The blood must reward. She reached up, her slender fingers tracing the intricate alien scar on his forearm. Jack's pulse hammered. A chemical fog filled his brain. His instincts screamed at him. Part of him, a deep, primal part, wanted to pull her close, to crush his mouth to hers, to claim the reward she offered. He recognized the feeling. He'd felt it once before from a Xylothian interrogator during the siege of Kandor. Pheromones, a biological weapon. He grabbed her wrist. His voice came out as a low growl. Stop. She froze. Confusion, sharp and genuine, flooded her features. I offer myself. It is the custom. It is the reward. It's a trick, Jack snapped, pushing her back. He wasn't gentle, he was angry. Angry that they had warped her, reduced her, turned her into this. Whatever they did to you, whatever they taught you, it's not going to work. Not on me. He backed her against the cold steel hull of the vagabond. He planted his scarred arm on the wall by her head, caging her in. He was breathing hard, fighting the last chemical vestiges of the pull. I don't want a reward. I want answers. Who are you? Lyrena. Really? Why would an empire go to this much trouble to call you worthless right before they tried to incinerate you? Lyrena stared at him, her mouth slightly open, her one good eye wide. The heavy, sweet scent in the air vanished, replaced by the cold, metallic smell of fear. She looked truly lost. In her entire, calculated, painful life, no one had ever said no. High above them, nestled in the dark steel rafters of the hangar, a device no larger than Jack's thumb pivoted on silent micro-servos. Its multifaceted lens, black and silent, zoomed in on the scene. It captured the anger in Jack's face, the terror in Lyrena's, and the raw, dangerous energy arcing between them. It compressed the data, aimed itself at the heavens, and sent a single encrypted burst of information toward the cold, waiting stars. The neural leash was a problem. The green lights pulsing beneath her skin were a constant, sickly reminder that she was property. Jack had spent 2 days running diagnostics with the hangar's auto-dock, and the results were grim. The implants were wired directly into her brainstem. One wrong move, one pulse of energy, and it could paralyze her or kill her outright. I can't get it out, firecracker, he said, leaning back from the console, his face lit by the glowing anatomical diagram. This isn't just a tracker, it's a governor. It's designed to kill you if you step out of line, and the tech is council grade. I don't have the tools. Lyrena, who was now dressed in a pair of his old patched flight trousers and a tunic, simply watched him. She had regained her strength, her alien physiology healing the internal injuries at a startling rate. The burns on her face and body remained, a stark, pale web of scar tissue. Then you will acquire them. It was not a request. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not that simple. The people who have this kind of tech, they're not friendly, and they're not cheap. You are a scavenger. Scavenge. Right. He rubbed the back of his neck and walked over to his primary comms unit, a mess of wires and salvaged screens. He punched in a long, encrypted code. Just stay quiet. This person is complicated. The main screen flickered, resolving into the face of a woman. She was sharp, with dark eyes, darker hair cut short, and a smile that looked like it could cut glass. She was sitting in the cockpit of her own ship, the background a blur of hyperspace. "Jack Thorne," she said, her voice a smooth, amused contralto. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I thought you dropped off the grid for good. Find a nice patch of desert to die in?" "Hello, Risha," Jack said, forcing a casual tone. "Still running junk for the Outer Rim cartels? The junk pays well, better than the military pension anyway." Her eyes swept the hangar behind him, sharp and assessing. "You look terrible, Jack. Worse than usual. What do you need? And what's it going to cost me?" "I need a surgical override kit, specifically a council-issue neural interface breaker, Mark IV or later." Risha's smile vanished. "That's not junk, Jack. That's military hardware. High level. You trying to start a war?" "Trying to end one," he said. "Can you get it?" "Maybe. But the price will be steep. You know the cost for that level of risk. I'll need at least 10,000 credits, and that's just for my trouble. Plus, you owe me. Remember Omega Station? I remember you leaving me to take the fall for that weapons charge," Jack grumbled. "I remember you being too slow," she countered, her smile returning. "Send me the credits. I'll see what I can do, but Jack," her voice softened, "just a fraction. Be careful. That's deep water. Deeper than you're used to." "Always am." "No, you're not," she said, and cut the connection. Jack let out a long breath and turned. Lyrina was standing right behind him, her good eyes narrowed, her face a mask of cold scrutiny. "She is familiar to you," Lyrina stated. "Yeah, we used to run together," Jack said, wiping down the console. "You have a weak pulse response to her, a physiological acceleration. You desire her." Jack stopped, staring at her. "What? No, it's complicated when we have history." "History," Lyrina repeated, testing the word. She looked at the blank screen where Risha's face had been. She was a complete woman, unscarred, confident. Then she looked down at her own hands, at the burns that snaked up her arm. "She is perfect, like the ones who discarded me." "She's far from perfect, trust me," Jack said, missing the point. "But you trust her, with your life, with mine." Lyrina's voice was quiet, but it had a new, sharp edge. It was the first time Jack had ever heard an emotion from her that wasn't rage or fear. It was something new, something cold and possessive. "You will not be familiar with her again." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Are you giving me an order, firecracker? Or are you jealous?" "I do not know this." "Jealous," she said, lifting her chin. "But I know what is mine. You carry my blood in your arm. You are claimed. You will not betray that bond." Before he could respond, she turned and stalked back to her cot, leaving Jack staring after her, a slow, bewildered smile spreading across his face. "The jealousy, it turned out, was a symptom of a larger change. Lyrina was thawing. The cold, royal protocol was cracking, and the person underneath was emerging, and she was deeply, profoundly strange. She began to understand human interaction, not as a set of rules, but as a chaotic, messy reality. She started with sarcasm. It was a language she seemed to innately comprehend. "We need food," he'd announced one morning, looking at his empty ration synthesizer. "I'll have to make a run into New Vegas." "And you will leave me here, unprotected?" she'd asked, her arms crossed. "I'll lock the hangar. You'll be fine. Unless you're scared of the scorpions. Your desert insects are primitive. I am not scared." She paused. "I am more concerned they will be scared. Of your face." Jack had stopped, a toolkit in his hand. He looked at her. Her expression was completely serious. And then, the corner of her unscarred mouth twitched. "Did you just make a joke?" he asked, incredulous. "I made a statement of fact," she replied, but the twitch was undeniable. The real breakthrough came 3 days later. Jack was trying to repair a faulty hydraulic lift on the Vagabond, working underneath it. The ancient mechanism sputtered, groaned, and then released its fluid all at once, dousing him in thick, black, foul-smelling grease. He emerged, dripping and cursing, wiping the sludge from his eyes. "Damn it, that's the last of the clean fluid." He looked over at Lyrina. She was watching him, her head tilted. A strange sound came from her. It was a short, sharp gasp, like a cough. He frowned. "What?" She did it again, louder this time. A breathy, sudden exhale. Her hand came up to her mouth. Her good eye was wide, sparkling, but she was laughing, and it was a rusty, unused sound, but it was undeniably a laugh. The sight of him, the strong Terran covered in filth and utterly defeated by a machine, had broken her composure. The sound shocked her as much as it did him. She clamped her mouth shut, her eyes wide with a strange new terror, as if she'd just betrayed a deep secret. But Jack just stood there, dripping grease, and started to laugh too, a low, tired chuckle. "It's not that funny," he said, smiling. "It is," she whispered, the smile still fighting for control of her face. "It is a disaster. You are a disaster." That night, the tension between them was different. It was lighter. The fear was gone. She sat near him while he worked at his bench, cleaning the scar on his arm. The alien blood had fused with his skin, creating a pattern that was almost beautiful, like a violet constellation. She reached out, her fingers hesitant, and gently, so gently, touched the mark. Her touch was not the hypnotic, pheromone-laced caress from before. It was a simple, tactile question. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No, not anymore," he said, his voice quiet. "It just itches sometimes." "It is part of me," she whispered, tracing the swirling lines. "On you, the blood, it marked you as mine, just as the council marked me as theirs." She looked at the green lights on her own back, then back at his arm. "I prefer my mark." He looked at her, at the scarred side of her face turned toward him in the dim hangar light. He saw, for the first time, not the broken specimen but the survivor. That night, her dreams were on fire, not the fire of the collapsing compound, but the cold fire of a laboratory. She was small, floating in a birthing matrix. Faces, blurred and sterile, looked in. The third-tier womb is unstable, genetic drift at 11%. The Corinthian markers are pure, but the secondary sample. The Terran DNA is too recessive. It is creating empathy, a defect. She remembered the pain, not of fire, but of needles, of genetic scrapers. They tried to correct her, to burn the human flaw out of her. They had given her the scars, trying to fix what they perceived as a failed experiment. She is imperfect, a waste of a royal hybrid, designate Zeta, worthless. She woke up with a gasp, the smell of ozone and the cold desert air in her lungs. Jack was asleep in his chair, his head tilted back, a rifle across his lap. She watched him, the rhythm of his breathing, the solid, unshakable reality of him. He was not complex, he was simple, he was protected, he fed, he laughed. He was more real than any prince, any inheritor she had ever known. "You need to know how to fight," Jack said the next day. The sun was setting, painting the desert in hues of blood orange and violet. He'd taken her outside the hangar. "I'm not talking about whatever royal combat they taught you. I'm talking about surviving." "I was trained," she said, bristling. "I'm sure you were." "Let's see it." He lunged. It was a simple soldier's move, fast, brutal, low. She countered with something Jack had never seen. It was fluid, almost like a dance, a series of open-palm deflections that redirected his momentum. She was fast, inhumanly fast, but she had no weight, no grounding. "Stop that," he grunted, shoving her back. "Stop. Dancing. You're trying to win points. You need to hurt me. Use your weight." "I am." "No, you're not." He moved in again, and this time he didn't hold back. He feinted a punch and swept her legs. She hit the red sand hard, the breath knocked out of her. She stared up at him, shocked, and sand in her moonlight-colored hair. "See?" he said, offering a hand. "On the street, they don't bow before they hit you." She slapped his hand away and sprang up, pure fury in her eyes. "Again." This time she came at him. She was all instinct, all rage. The formal, beautiful moves were gone. She was a whirlwind of kicks and strikes. He blocked, parried, taking the hits on his forearms, impressed by her raw speed. The air crackled around them. It was no longer training. It was a fight. He saw an opening and went for a grapple, intending to take her down again. But she was ready. She twisted, using his own weight against him, and in a move so fast he barely registered it. She had him on his back, his arm locked, and her knee on his chest. She was pinning him, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling, her good eye blazing with a wild, triumphant fire. The setting sun caught the edges of her scars, making them glow. They stayed like that for a long second. The only sound was their harsh breathing and the desert wind. "Not bad, firecracker," Jack panted, a genuine smile on his face. Her face was inches from his. The anger faded, replaced by that same intense scrutiny. She had won. She had proven herself. "You are strong," she whispered, her voice low. "For a scavenger. For a Terran." She leaned closer, her hair brushing his cheek. "You would have made a worthy prince." The line hung in the air. The animosity, the training, it all evaporated. All that remained was proximity, the desert heat, the weight of her on his chest. He saw her, really saw her. The broken and the beautiful, the warrior and the victim. And he wanted, more than anything, to kiss her. He lifted his head. His gaze dropped to her mouth. She didn't pull away. She didn't move. Her eyes fluttered, a sign of... What? Fear? Anticipation? He leaned in. He was a millimeter away. And he stopped. He saw the leash lights pulse on her back. He saw the scars. He felt the phantom itch on his own arm. What was he doing? Was this desire? Or was it just pity? Was he just another man taking advantage of a broken girl? He broke the contact, his face hardening. "Get off me." He shoved her off, not gently, and stood, brushing the sand from his clothes. He turned his back to her. Training's over. Lyrena sat on the sand, watching him walk back to the hangar. She wrapped her arms around her knees, the victorious fire in her eyes extinguished, leaving her looking confused, rejected, and colder than the desert night. Jack stalked back to his comm station, furious with himself. He needed a distraction, something to focus on besides the girl in the desert. He started a deep space scan, hunting for any chatter related to Risha's search for the override kit. His console pinged. Sal's dry voice filled the hangar. Encrypted burst detected, high-level Corinthian diplomatic frequency. It is locked. Jack. Put it on screen. Run the decryptor. Use my old military overrides. This is highly illegal, Sal noted. Do it. For an hour, the screen was a cascade of falling code. Jack paced. The image of Lyrena's face, so close to his, burned into his mind. Then, the console beeped. The file unlocked. It wasn't a message. It was a data file, a genetic profile, specimen Zeta. Lyrena, project, heir apparent hybrid, status, failed, primary genetic source, Corinthian royal, Valari line, secondary genetic source, contaminated, Terran, unknown donor. Notes, subject displays emotional instability, teleempathic resonance, and unpredictable cellular rejection. Hybridization is deemed a threat to bloodline purity. Order, immediate termination. Sanitize Delta 49. Jack stared. Terran. He looked at Lyrena, who had come back inside and was watching him from the shadows. They didn't just find you, they made you. What? Your DNA. It's not just Corinthian. It's human. You're part Terran. Lyrena. Before she could process this, every light in the hangar simultaneously exploded. Shards of glass rained down. A klaxon blared. Warning, Sal yelled. Multiple ships inbound, unidentified, weapons are hot. Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rifle from his workbench and threw a plasma pistol to Lyrena. Get behind the vagabond, now! The hangar's main door blasted inward, torn from its hinges like paper. 3 figures, sleek and black in environmental armor, stalked in. They weren't council soldiers. They were assassins. They moved with a silent, inhuman grace. They opened fire. Plasma bolts, a sickening, silent green, tore through the hangar, melting Jack's tools, his generator, his life's work. Jack fired back, his military training kicking in. Cover! Move! He dropped one assassin with 2 precise shots to the chest. The second one flanked him, and Jack was forced to dive behind a stack of salvaged engines. Lyrena wasn't hiding. She was standing, pistol in hand, but she was frozen. Her eyes were fixed on the lead assassin who had paused and was now walking slowly toward her. Specimen Zeta, its voice hissed, synthesized and metallic. By order of the inheritors, your existence is terminated. It raised its rifle. Lyrena, move, Jack bellowed. He was pinned down by the 3rd assassin. He couldn't get a clean shot. Lyrena screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. The assassin's rifle suddenly, violently, ripped itself from his grasp. It flew across the hangar and slammed into the far wall. The assassin looked at his empty hands, confused. He staggered back, clutching his helmet, as if struck by an invisible force. Lyrena had her hand outstretched, her entire body trembling, a faint, violet aura crackling around her. Jack stared. Telekinesis. The distraction was all he needed. He vaulted over the engine block, put 2 rounds in the 3rd assassin, and 1 in the leader's back. All 3 dropped. Silence. The hangar was destroyed, smoke filling the air. Jack looked at Lyrena, who was staring at her own trembling hand. What did I... The hybridization, Jack said, his mind racing. It wasn't a failure, it was a success. He grabbed her arm. They know. The message I intercepted. It must have triggered a dead man's switch. Then we're out of time. We're leaving Earth. He pulled her into the Vagabond, slamming the cockpit hatch. He fired the engines, the ship screaming to life. They blasted out of the ruined hangar, straight up, punching a hole through the desert atmosphere and into the cold, black sanctuary of space. For 2 days, they flew. The Vagabond was small, the cockpit cramped. They sat shoulder to shoulder, the silence thick. The only sound, the hum of the engines and the faint clicks of the navigation computer. Jack set the course. Cradle 6, he said. It's a neutral zone, an outlaw station. If anyone can help us, we'll find them there. On the third night, the adrenaline had long since faded. They were just 2 people in a very small box, surrounded by an endless, hostile dark. Lyrina had been watching him for hours, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper above the engine hum. You fought for me. You killed for me. No one has ever done that. The Terrans in my genes. Are you all this loyal? She paused, looking at her hands. Or are you simply flawed, like me? Jack turned in his chair. The cockpit lights were dim, casting her face in shadows and pale blue light from the star chart. He saw the scars. He saw the perfect skin. He saw the confusion, the power, the pain. He finally had his answer. It was not a pity. He leaned across the console. He put his hand on her cheek, his thumb brushing her scarred skin. You're not flawed, Lyrina. You're terrifying. And he kissed her. It was not the hesitant, uncertain kiss from the desert. This was desperate, fueled by the fight, the flight, and the cold reality of the void. It was slow, a silent promise in the dark. It was the kiss of a man who had nothing left to lose, and a woman who had just found something to fight for. It was, for both of them, unforgettable. Cradle 6 was not a station, it was a scar, a tangled knot of steel, regret, and bad code held together by desperation. It floated in the black aorta of the neutral zone, a place where empires came to forget their laws. Neon signs in a dozen alien languages bled holographic colors onto the constant, synthetic rain that washed the station's outer hull. The Vagabond docked in a public hangar that smelled of ozone, burnt wiring, and something sickly sweet that Jack associated with Xylothian spice dens. The kiss from the ship hung between them, a silent, unexploded charge. It had changed the air, making the small cockpit almost unbearable. Now, on the station, the tension was a different animal. It was sharp, brittle. We're here for the archivist, Jack said, breaking the silence as they walked down a crowded causeway. He handed Lyrina a heavy rain cloak. Keep the hood up. The archivist is a data broker, a legend. They deal in secrets and they don't take appointments. We wait for a summons. And this archivist, can they be trusted? Lyrina asked, pulling the hood low so it shadowed both her perfect eye and her scarred one. Trusted? No. But they hate the Council of Inheritors more than they hate small-time scavengers. That makes them reliable. They found a bar in the lower levels, a place called the Gravity Well. It was packed. Twi'leks, Arconians, and a few rogue Terran smugglers crowded around glowing tables. The music was a heavy subsonic pulse. Jack found a dark booth in the corner, his back to the wall. He motioned for her to sit. I will stand, she said. Sit, Lyrina. You're drawing attention. She sat, her back rigid, her posture still that of a princess in a royal court, not a fugitive in a dive bar. Jack ordered 2 glasses of synthetic whiskey. He slid one to her. She looked at the amber liquid with disdain. Jack took a long drink, the burn familiar and grounding. He was scanning the crowd, watching the exits, his soldier's instincts on high alert. He was so focused on the room that he didn't, at first, notice her watching him. She was studying him. The kiss had unlocked something in her, but it had also terrified her. The rejection in the desert, followed by the desperation on the ship. She was a creature of calculated responses, and for the first time, she had no protocol for this. She needed to know what he felt. She needed to test the bond. A tall, reptilian alien, a slar with iridescent green scales, sauntered over. He was dressed in expensive silks, a smuggler by the look of him. He hissed something appreciative at Lorena, his forked tongue flicking out. Jack's hand tightened on his glass. "Get lost," he growled. The slar ignored him, his eyes fixed on Lorena. He offered her his hand. The music had shifted to something slow and hypnotic. "Lorena, don't," Jack said, his voice low. She looked at Jack, her good eye holding his. Then slowly, deliberately, she turned the unscarred side of her face to the alien. She gave him a small, perfect, devastating smile. She placed her hand in his. Jack watched, a cold, slow-burning anger building in his gut as the slar led her onto the small dance floor. She moved with an alien grace, a fluidity that was hypnotic. The slar put his hands on her waist, and she let him. She was a natural. She'd been trained for this, for court functions and royal balls. And she was using it, here, in this pit, to provoke him. She looked back at Jack over the alien's shoulder. Her expression was a clear, cold challenge. "You rejected me in the desert. You kissed me on the ship. Which is it? Do you desire me, or not?" He was done. Jack crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't say a word. He grabbed her arm, yanking her away from the stunned slar. "Hey!" the alien hissed, reaching for a weapon. Jack spun, his other hand already holding his plasma pistol. The barrel pressed under the slar's chin before he could even clear his holster. "Touch her again," Jack whispered, "and I'll redecorate the wall with your brainstem." He didn't wait for an answer. He dragged Lorena through the crowd, ignoring her protests, and slammed her into a narrow, dark alcove behind the bar. It was cold, the metal walls slick with condensation. He slammed his hand against the wall by her head, caging her in. He was breathing hard, his face inches from hers. "What in the hell did you think you were doing?" he snarled. "I was dancing," she panted, her bravado faltering now that she had his full, undivided attention. "A Terran custom, is it not? That wasn't dancing, that was a death wish. You want to get us caught? You want to get yourself sold to the highest bidder?" You did not look at me," she finally whispered, the real raw truth of it surfacing. "On the ship, and now, you look at everyone but me. I had to know. I had to know if I what?" His voice was a low, rough growl. "If I still desire you? After that kiss? You think that reptile could make you feel what I felt?" He leaned closer. His lips brushed the shell of her ear, his breath hot against her skin. The vibration of his voice made her shiver. "Never," he whispered, his voice vibrating with a possessive fury that was more intimate than a caress. "Never doubt it again. Do you understand me?" She was trembling, her hands flat against his chest. She could only nod, her throat tight. A loud, piercing alarm cut through the bar's music. Red lights strobed across the alcove, illuminating their faces. An automated voice blared over the speakers. "Alert! Political bounties detected in this sector. Code Zeta. Lockdown initiated." "Zeta!" Jack cursed, pulling his pistol. "They're here for you, Dedem. We have to move. Now!" They ran. They bypassed the bar, heading for the service tunnels. The archivist's lair was in the high-security diplomatic sector, 3 levels up. The only way through was a high-speed transit line, guarded by a biometric checkpoint. They reached it just as a squad of black-armored bounty hunters, Arconians by their heavy mechanical gait, rounded the corner behind them. At the checkpoint, a single bored-looking human guard sat in a reinforced booth. "Passes," he said, not looking up. "We don't have passes," Jack said, sliding a credit chip across the counter. "We have an appointment. Diplomatic immunity." The guard looked at the chip, then at them. He sighed. "Immunity's voided during a Zeta lockdown. I can't let you through without a bioscan. New protocols. Anti-espionage." "Do it," Jack said, glancing over his shoulder. The Arconians were getting closer. "Right. You two. Step into the chamber." The guard pointed to a small, white, sterile booth. "It scans for species compatibility. If you're not bonded, it'll flag you for a full cavity search. Your choice." "Bonded?" Lorena whispered. "Just follow my lead," Jack muttered. They stepped into the chamber. The door hissed shut, sealing them in. The bright white light was blinding. "Please disrobe for biosignature confirmation," an automated voice chimed. "All synthetic materials must be removed for the genetic resonance scanner." Jack stared at the speaker. "He's bluffing." "They can hear us," Lorena said, her voice shaking. "He is not. I can feel the scanner priming. It's an authenticity test. A mating bond." Jack could hear the heavy metallic footsteps of the bounty hunters outside. They were trapped. "Damn it!" He turned his back, pulling his jacket and shirt off. He heard her hesitant movements behind him. This was wrong. This was a violation. It was cold, clinical, and 1,000 times more intimate than the dark cockpit of the vagabond. "Jack," she whispered. He turned. She had removed the cloak and her tunic. She stood before him, bathed in the harsh, sterile light. She was trying to cover herself, her arms crossed over her chest. The white light was cruel, showing every detail of her body. The flawless, pale skin of her right side, and the devastating web-like network of pale scar tissue that covered her left. It puckered the skin, twisting her perfect beauty into something broken. He saw her shame. He saw her terror. And in that moment, she was not an alien, not a princess, not a weapon. She was just a girl, terrified of being seen. The automated voice droned. "Physical contact is required to verify resonance. Please initiate contact." She was trembling, her good eyes squeezed shut. Jack moved slowly, his heart hammering. He didn't reach for her perfect side. He reached for her scars. He gently pulled her arms away and placed his calloused hand flat on her scarred waist. Lorena gasped, her eyes flying open. The touch was warm, firm. It wasn't a touch of revulsion or pity. It was a touch of acceptance. He pulled her closer. She let him. She was shaking so hard he could feel it in his own bones. She collapsed against him, her scarred cheek pressing against his bare chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, his skin against hers, his own scars, old and new, against hers. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice rough. "It's okay. I've got you." "Jack," she sobbed, a single broken sound. Biometric resonance confirmed. The voice chimed, suddenly cheerful. "Bond status, stable. Welcome to the diplomatic sector. Please redress." The door buzzed open. They sprang apart, scrambling for their clothes, their hands shaking. They didn't look at each other. They had just bared everything, and the emotional fallout was too raw to process. They dressed in silence and walked out past the bored guard. who just waved them through. The archivist's chamber was a cavern of data. There was no person there, just a cold, dark void illuminated by swirling columns of light, representing zettabytes of stolen information. "You are late," a voice echoed, synthesized and ancient. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The bounty hunters are crude. You bring a powerful genetic imprint. Scavenger." "I brought you the file I intercepted," Jack said, sliding the data chip into a glowing console. "Tell me what it is. Tell me what she is." The data exploded onto the holographic displays, Corinthian royal bloodlines, complex equations, and then a second string, smaller, simpler, overlaid on the first, H, sapiens. "It is a heresy," the archivist's voice intoned. "A 200-year-old sin. Project Unity." "What are you talking about?" Jack demanded. "The Great Terran-Corinthian War. Your empires tore a gash in this galaxy. A secret faction on both sides believed the only path to a lasting peace was engineered, not a treaty, a child." The data swirled. "A hybrid, born of the highest Corinthian royal blood, and a Terran soldier. An heir who could feel Terran empathy, wields Corinthian power. They sought to engineer peace." Jack looked at Lorena. She was standing frozen, her hand over her mouth. An ancient peace-breeding experiment, Jack realized, the horror of it dawning. "They succeeded," the archivist said, "but the war ended. A truce was signed. The project became an inconvenience. A hybrid child was a threat to the pure bloodline. Her empathy, her human half, was classified as a biological defect." The voice grew colder. "They did not kill the original project. They used it. They harvested its DNA, creating lesser copies in third-tier wombs, trying to purify the line. You, Lorena, are one of those copies, a failed attempt. And when you, too, showed the defect of human emotion, they discarded you. You were born to unite two worlds. Instead, you are unloved by any." It was a stake through the heart. Her entire identity, her royal pride, her suffering, her scars, it was all a lie, a failed experiment, a biological error. "No," she whispered. "No. I am royal. I am—" "You are a ghost," the archivist replied. "A secret that must be kept. They will never stop hunting you." Lorena turned and ran from the chamber, a choked animal sound of pure agony tearing from her throat. Jack found her in the small, sterile room they had rented. She was in the corner, in the dark, trying to tear the neural leash from her own spine, her fingernails bloody. "I am nothing," she was whispering, over and over, the words dry and broken. "I am a project, a mistake. I am worthless." She was using their words, the word from the data slate in the fire. It shattered something in Jack. He knelt in front of her. He didn't say anything. He just grabbed her wrists gently but firmly, pulling her bloody hands away from her back. He held them, staining his own hands with her violet blood. "They lied," he said, his voice a low, rough command. "Look at me. They lied. What am I?" She sobbed, the tears finally coming, hot and furious. "I am not Corinthian. I am not Terran. I don't belong to any world. You belong to me," he said. The words were simple, absolute. It wasn't a claim of ownership. It was a statement of fact, a shield. He pulled her up and sat on the edge of the cot, bringing her down with him. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest, and just held on. He was an anchor in the storm of her collapsed reality. She broke. All the protocol, all the pride, all the rage, it dissolved. She wept. She wept for the identity that was a lie, for the family that had engineered and then discarded her, for the unbearable, crushing loneliness of being a defect. Jack held her. He rocked her gently, his hand stroking her hair, his chin resting on top of her head. He held her through the long, synthetic night of Cradle 6. The neon lights outside their window pulsed, and the rain fell, and he just held her. They didn't sleep. They didn't need to. The next morning, the rain was still pouring, a constant drumming rhythm on the hangar's transparent steel roof. Lyrena was quiet. She was too quiet. Her eyes were dry, her face calm, almost serene. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. Risha messaged, Jack said, packing a small bag. She dropped the override kit at a dead drop in the lower levels. I'm going to get it. You stay here. Lock the door. When I get back, we get that. Leash, off your back for good. Then we disappear. Lyrena nodded. She even smiled, a small, sad, perfect smile. Be safe, Jack. He paused. You too. He left, but the words echoed in his head. Be safe. It was wrong. Too human. Too normal. He got to the end of the causeway and stopped. A cold dread washed over him. He sprinted back to the hangar. He skidded around the corner just in time to see the Vagabond's main loading ramp retracting. The engines were already whining, their pitch rising. Lyrena! He roared. He saw her in the cockpit, her face pale, tears streaming down her scarred cheeks. She looked at him, her hand on the throttle. I am a heresy, she whispered, her voice too quiet for him to hear, but he saw the words on her lips. I will not be the end of you, Jack. I will not let them burn your world to find me. She slammed her fist on the hatch seal control. Jack ran. He ran full tilt, pumping his legs, the rain making the metal deck slick. The ramp was closing. He had 1 second. He launched himself, a desperate, flying leap, catching the very edge of the rising ramp with his fingertips. He grunted, his muscles screaming as he hauled himself up, squeezing through the gap just as it slammed shut and sealed. He stormed the cockpit, his face a mask of cold fury. He hit the emergency engine kill switch. The ship shuddered, the turbines winding down with a groan. Silence. He ripped the pilot's hatch open and hauled her bodily out of the chair. He didn't speak. He dragged her, kicking and fighting him, back down the ramp, which he forced open. He dragged her out into the pouring synthetic rain of the hangar bay. She slipped on the wet metal. He went down with her, tackling her. He pinned her to the loading ramp, the cold rain plastering his clothes to his skin, her hair splayed out around her. She was screaming, hitting his chest with her small fists. Let me go, I am too dangerous, I am a bomb, let me die. He grabbed her wrists, pinning them above her head. He was on top of her, his weight holding her down, the rain pouring over both of them like a judgment. No, he snarled, his face inches from hers. You don't get to choose. You don't get to choose who dies for you. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a raw, ragged whisper that was more powerful than any shout. I already did. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of comfort. It was not a kiss of desire. It was a kiss of pure, undiluted rage. It was possession. It was a brand. It tasted of rain and ozone and the iron tang of his own fury. He was claiming her, not her body, but her pain, her future, her fate. He was forging a bond in the heart of the storm. He broke the kiss, leaving her breathless, her fight completely gone. She was just staring up at him, her good eyes wide, her scarred face washed clean by the rain. She was broken. A single ragged sob escaped her, her fingers no longer fists. Uncurled and grabbed the front of his shirt, clinging to him. Then take me, she whispered, her voice completely shattered. Jack, take me. Make me yours, or I'll never feel again. Ariax Prime was a world carved from white marble and cold ambition. As the central jewel of the Council of Inheritors, it had no orbital graveyards, no neon-scarred outlaw stations. Its skies were a pristine, protected blue, patrolled by elegant warships that moved with the silent arrogance of apex predators. The cities were sterile, symmetrical, and suffocatingly beautiful. There was no synthetic rain here, only perfectly managed sunlight that gleamed on towers of glass and pearl. The vagabond, flying under a stolen and heavily modified diplomatic code, was directed to a low-level servant's port. The moment the ramp lowered, the air felt different. It was heavy, filtered, and smelled of oppressive floral arrangements. "The ruse starts now," Jack said. His voice was flat. He wore a simple, rough-spun gray tunic, and around his neck, a heavy, inert servitude collar. It was a fake, but it looked chillingly real. His plasma pistol was broken down and hidden in the lining of a water skin. Lyrina stood beside him. She was also in a servant's drab tunic, but her hair was bound, her posture stiff. The neural leash Risha's tech had finally disabled was gone, but the scars on her back remained. Here, on the Council's home turf, they felt like they were burning again. "I am Servant Lyra, of the third house," she recited, her voice a strained monotone. "You are Jack, my property, a Terran brute, assigned to me for heavy labor." "Just Lyra," Jack corrected. "No servant. Your low-level diplomatic staff, which gives you just enough authority to have one piece of property. Remember the codes, remember the mission. We get to the genetic archive. We find the original file on Project Unity, and we get out." "I remember," she whispered. She looked at the collar around his neck, her good eye filled with a pain that was deeper than anger. I do not like this." "I don't either," he said. "But it's the only way they'll let a flawed Corinthian and a brute Terran walk into the heart of their empire. Let's go." The shift in their dynamic was immediate, and it was poison. In the sterile, white corridors of the palace sublevels, she walked a step ahead of him. He was forced to keep his gaze lowered. Council guards, with their featureless mirrored helmets, watched them pass. Their contempt for Jack was a palpable force, a cold wave of disgust directed at his species, his collar, his mere existence, and Lyrina, to protect them, had to feed that contempt. They were stopped at the first major checkpoint, a high-ceilinged atrium where servants and slaves were processed. A haughty, pure-blooded Corinthian official, his robes a shimmering silver, scanned her data slate. "Servant Lyra," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your clearance is minimal, and this thing," he gestured to Jack, "it smells. Why is a Terran so close to the upper levels?" Jack's muscles tensed. He could kill this man in 3 seconds. He felt Lyrina's fear, a sudden, sharp spike. "It is strong, Administrator," Lyrina said, her voice surprisingly cold. She did not look at the official, but at a spot on the wall just past his shoulder. "It is required for the coolant block transport in Sector Gamma." The official sneered, his eyes moving over Jack. "It looks defiant. Does it obey?" It is difficult," Lyrina said, her voice trembling, almost imperceptibly. "Then teach it," the official said, his tone bored. "Teach it its place, or I will have it vivisected for impurities." Jack saw the moment of conflict in her. The terror, the rage, and the sudden ice-cold realization of what she had to do. She turned to Jack. Her face was a mask of stone. Her perfect sapphire eye was as cold as the marble floor. "Kneel," she commanded. Jack's jaw tightened. This was not part of the plan. He stared at her. "Don't do this, Lyra. Kneel!" she snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. The guards were watching. The official was smiling, slowly, his entire body rigid with suppressed fury. Jack dropped to one knee. It was not enough. "She told you to kneel, Terran scum," the official hissed. "All the way." Lyrina stepped forward. She was shaking. "You will obey me," she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear the agony in it. Then, for the official, she raised her voice. "You will learn respect." She slapped him. Her open palm cracked across his face. The sound was sharp, shocking in the quiet atrium. Jack's head snapped to the side from the force of it. He stayed there, frozen, his cheeks stinging, the metallic tang of his own blood filling his mouth where his teeth had cut his lip. He slowly turned his head back to look at her. Her face was pale, her hands still raised, trembling. The mask was perfect. She looked like them. She looked cruel. The official chuckled, satisfied. "See that it is trained. Lyra, proceed." She walked past Jack without a word. After a moment, he rose, his head bowed, and followed. He followed the sound of her footsteps, the blood from his lip dripping silently onto the white floor. Their assigned quarters were a sterile, windowless box, barely larger than a closet, deep in the servants' wing. The door hissed shut, sealing them in. For a full minute, they just stood in silence. Lyrina was facing the wall, her back to him. "Lyra," he said, his voice rough. She turned. The mask was gone. Her face was shattered. Tears streamed from both her eyes, the scarred and the perfect. She lunged at him, her hands grabbing the front of his tunic, her head pressing hard against his chest. "I am sorry," she choked out, the words muffled. "I am sorry. I hit you. Jack, Shh," he said, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her tight. He could feel the fine tremors running through her entire body. "You did what you had to do. You saved us. It's okay." "It is not okay," she cried, pulling back to look at him. Her fingers, stained with his blood, gently touched his cut lip. I looked. I liked them. I felt the power. It was ugly. It was a role, he said, his own voice unsteady. "It wasn't you." "But it was," she whispered, her gaze frantic. "It was the part of me that is them, the part that is cold." She scrubbed at her face, her breath hitching. I need it to be gone." She grabbed his hand, the one with the violet scar from her blood, and pressed it to her scarred cheek. "Touch me, Jack. Please. I need to feel us. I need to feel real." She was pleading for him to erase the cold, false reality of the atrium with the raw, true reality of their bond. He was her anchor. The only thing in her entire fractured life that was not a lie. He cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. He looked at her, the woman who had struck him and the woman who was breaking in his arms. They were the same. "You are real," he murmured. "You are the realest thing I have ever known." He kissed her, tasting the salt of her tears and the iron of his own blood. It was not a kiss of passion, but of reaffirmation. It was a desperate, healing touch in a world of lies, a promise that the roles they played outside this room did not matter. Here, in the dark. She was not a servant, and he was not a slave. They were just Jack and Lyrina. The infiltration of the archive was almost easier. Disguised as sanitation technicians, they used the codes they'd stolen to access the central data vault. It was a place of terrible beauty. A vast cold chamber where genetic histories were stored in shimmering crystalline spires. "Project Unity," Lyrina whispered, her hand activating the console. The file bloomed in the air before them, a holographic tapestry of data. It was all there. The original plan. The secret pact between the Terran High Command and the Corinthian reformists. Gods, Jack breathed, reading the text as it scrolled. It wasn't just about peace, Lyra. It was engineered love. The data was explicit. The hybrid child was designed to be a bridge, not just politically, but emotionally. They had tried to force a bond. They had taken Terran empathy, the capacity for selfless, irrational loyalty, and woven it into the Corinthian royal line. They had tried to create a ruler who would be biologically incapable of not loving the other side. And then, the final, brutal addendum. Subject Zeta, defect, empathy levels exceed command parameters. Subject displays Terran loyalty fixation, prioritizing emotional bonds over bloodline purity and strategic objectives. This love is a flaw. It compromises the project. Recommend termination. They had succeeded. They had created a being capable of pure, unifying love, and they had seen it as a defect. They had tried to burn it out of her, and in doing so, had scarred her, tortured her, and discarded her. Lyrina stared at the words loyalty fixation and flaw. She looked at Jack. This is what I feel. For you. They called it a defect. If that's a defect, Jack said, his voice raw with a fury so cold it burned, then the whole universe is sick. He slammed a data spike into the console. The archivist gave me a list of independent media networks, the ones the council can't touch. What are you doing? I'm showing them the truth, he said. He began uploading the entire file. All of it. Project Unity. The failed experiment. The defect. I'm showing them what the council is so afraid of. The console flashed. Upload complete. Broadcast initiated. Let's see how the galaxy feels, Jack said, grabbing her hand. About a dynasty that's terrified of love. They were halfway back to the servants' wing when the world caught fire. Alarms blared, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the marble walls. Holographic news feeds, which normally showed state-controlled propaganda, fractured. They lit up with the image of the Project Unity files, with Lyrina's genetic code, with the words empathy deemed a defect, a political firestorm. Jack had thrown a grenade into the heart of the Empire. They'll lock down the port, Jack yelled over the din. We have to get to the vagabond. They ran, but the palace was already in chaos. Guards were everywhere, their mirrored helmets reflecting the flashing red emergency lights. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. Blocking their path was a woman. She was the mirror of Lyrina, perfect, flawless, and utterly cold. Her skin was the same alabaster, her hair the same moonlight silver. She wore the immaculate white and gold of a high princess. But her eyes were ancient and empty. Specimen Zeta, the princess said, her voice a perfect melodic chime. How disappointing. You have soiled our bloodline with this primitive. Lyrina froze. She knew, instantly. This was the source, the original. Vailari, she breathed. So the worthless copy knows my name, Princess Vailari said. Her cold eyes swept over Jack, lingering on the fake collar. You have bonded with a pet, a Terran. How appropriate. The defect of your genes, drawn to defective stock. It is almost poetic. Get out of our way, Jack growled, stepping in front of Lyrina, his hand moving toward the hidden pistol. Vailari laughed. It was a beautiful, terrible sound. The pet tries to bark. Your little data leak is meaningless. A riot in the Undercity, nothing more. I am here to offer you mercy. Little sister, a clean death, to protect the purity of the bloodline. And for your pet. She smiled. A quick vivisection. We are curious to see how the loyalty fixation manifests physically. You will not touch him, Lorena said. Her voice had changed. It was no longer the servant, no longer the victim. It was the voice of a woman who had seen the truth. A low, dangerous vibration filled the air. The telekinetic power. Vailari's smile wavered. She felt the pressure. So, the flaw has teeth. Before she could move, Jack fired, not at Vailari, but at the massive, ornate chandelier above her. It exploded in a shower of crystal and hot metal. Go, go, Jack roared, shoving Lorena toward a side passage. They plunged into the Undercity, the servants' tunnels giving way to raw, unfinished maintenance shafts. The riot Vailari had dismissed so easily was real. The broadcast had ignited the slums, the lower castes, the imperfects, the slaves. They were rising. The air was thick with smoke and the roar of a crowd. They were fighting their way through a packed tunnel, a mass of enraged, desperate people, when a blast door slammed down, separating them. Jack, Lorena screamed, keep going! He yelled back, slamming his shoulder against the unmoving steel. Get to the ship, go! On the other side of the door, he turned, his pistol coming up. A squad of Ariak's guards, their armor black and crimson, rounded the corner. He had run out of time. He took down two before a heavy stun blast hit him in the back, dropping him to his knees. The last thing he saw before the world went black was a steel-toed boot swinging at his face. Lorena made it to the hangar. The vagabond was there, but it was under heavy guard. She was alone. Jack was gone. The sense of loss was a physical void, so vast it threatened to swallow her. The defect, the loyalty fixation. It was screaming. She did not cry. She did not run. The girl who had been worthless was gone. The woman who remained was a hybrid of two worlds. She had Terran empathy, and she had Corinthian ruthlessness. She did not go to the hangar. She went up. She found the palace control core. It was the nerve center for the entire planetary defense grid. She used her royal adjacent genetic signature to bypass the initial locks, and Jack's stolen codes to bypass the rest. She stood before the core, a pulsating sphere of energy, and opened a channel to the Ariak's high command. Her face, half scarred, half perfect, appeared on every screen in the command center. She was no longer a servant. She was a specter. You have property of mine, she said, her voice echoing with cold, amplified power. A Terran. His name is Jack Thorne. You will release him. You will deliver him to Hangar Bay 7, cleared for takeoff. You have 10 minutes. A commander, the same one who had arrested Jack, laughed. And who are you, little defect, to give orders? Lorena placed her hand on the core's containment field. The energy sphere within it crackled, turning a violent, unstable red. I am Lorena, Project Unity, and I am a flaw, she said. Her telekinetic power, her empathy, her rage, all of it focused on the core. The entire palace began to shake. Alarms shrieked. This flaw is bonded to him. If he dies, my world ends. And I will take yours with me. Release him, or I overload the star shield. I will burn this entire planet, starting with the palace. The commander stared. He saw her eyes. She was not bluffing. She was a Terran, ready to die for loyalty. She was a Corinthian, ready to burn a world for a throne. Release him, the commander choked out. Release the Terran. Jack was thrown from an armored vehicle, his hands still bound. He was bruised, his lip resplit, but he was alive. He saw the vagabond, its ramp open, and he saw her, running toward him from the control tower. The guards cut his bonds and retreated. She reached him, her breath coming in ragged sobs. She didn't speak. She just fell into his arms, clinging to him so tightly he thought his ribs might crack. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in, his own hands shaking. She was trembling. She had been willing to destroy a world for him. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice thick. "You're okay." I... She couldn't form the words. He kissed her hard, cutting off the sobs. "I know, me too." He pulled her up the ramp. The hatch sealed, shutting out the alarms in the burning city. They were in the cockpit, safe. For a moment, he fired the engines, blasting them out of the hangar, away from the marble prison of Ariax Prime. They hit the jump point, the silence of hyperspace enveloping them. The adrenaline was gone, leaving an aching, desperate void. They were bruised, beaten, and hunted by the entire galaxy. They had only each other. They stumbled from the cockpit into the tiny, dark cargo bay. They didn't speak. There were no words for what they had just been through. He reached for her. She fell into him. It was desperate. It was feverish. It was not gentle. It was a raw, primal need to affirm that they were alive, that they were real. Their clothes were torn, their hands frantic, clinging, claiming. It was a battle against the cold, sterile world that had tried to tear them apart. It was two halves of a defect, two broken pieces finally completely becoming one. They were clinging to each other as if the universe itself was trying to shatter, and they were the only thing holding it together. The galaxy did not just burn, it screamed. The data Jack Thorne had released from the archives of Ariax Prime had traveled faster than light, infecting the sub-networks of 1,000 worlds. It was a virus of truth, the image of Larina's genetic profile, the proof that the High Council had engineered a child for peace and then discarded her because she loved too much, had shattered the illusion of Corinthian infallibility. On the factory moon of Otho, 3 million indentured workers downed their tools and marched on the governor's palace, chanting the name of the half-breed. In the neon slums of Cradle 6, the holographic billboards were hacked to display Larina's face, the scar on her cheek becoming a symbol of survival. She was no longer Specimen Zeta, to the broken, the lost, and the hybrid-born. She was the mother of unity, and Jack, the Terran scavenger who had carried her through the fire, was the sword that protected her. But symbols were heavy, and Jack was tired of carrying the weight. The vagabond limped into the docking bay of Helix Station, an asteroid colony controlled by the Terran Coalition. It was a hollowed-out rock spinning in the dark, fortified with railguns and thick armor plating. It was the only place that would take them in. The Terran government had officially denounced Jack as a terrorist to appease the Council, but unofficially they smelled an opportunity. They were met not by soldiers, but by diplomats in crisp gray suits. They were ushered quickly through the corridors, away from the prying eyes of the dock workers who strained to catch a glimpse of the famous fugitives. The conference room was cold, the air recycled and smelling of stale ozone. General Vance sat at the head of the table. He was a man made of right angles and scar tissue, a veteran of the border wars who looked at the universe as a series of assets and liabilities. "Sit," Vance said, gesturing to the metal chairs. He didn't offer water. Jack remained standing, his hand resting near the pistol at his hip. Larina sat, her posture regal despite her torn flight suit. She looked tired. The constant running, the weight of the collective gaze of billions, was eroding her. "You have caused quite a mess, Thorne," Vance said, tapping a data slate. "The Council is mobilizing 3 fleets. They are threatening to blockade the Sol sector, and they want your head." "They can come and take it," Jack said, his voice gravel. "We didn't come here for a lecture. Vance, we need fuel, we need supplies, and we need to disappear." "Disappear?" Vance let out a dry, humorless laugh. He stood up and walked over to a large viewport that looked out onto the asteroid field. "You don't get to disappear. You are the most valuable asset the Terran Coalition has ever stumbled upon. He turned to Larina. His eyes swept over her, calculating. He didn't see a person, he saw a weapon. The mother of unity, Vance mused. It is catchy. The outer rim worlds are ready to revolt. The hybrids are rallying. If we position you correctly, Lyrina, we can break the Council's hold on the trade routes. We can use this narrative to shift the balance of power. I am not a narrative, Lyrina said softly. Her voice was calm, but Jack heard the dangerous edge in it. You are what we need you to be, Vance said, waving a hand dismissively. We have a speech prepared. You will broadcast it from here. You will call for the overthrow of the inheritors. You will declare your allegiance to the Terran Coalition. We will paint you as the victim, and the Coalition as your savior. And Jack? Larina asked. Vance glanced at Jack with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Thorne has served his purpose. He is a liability. A scavenger romancing a princess plays well for the tabloids. But for a revolution, it's messy. We will set him up with a nice retirement package on Mars. Somewhere quiet. You need a consort of proper standing. A political match to cement the alliance. The room went deadly silent. Jack looked at Vance. He looked at the diplomats, nodding in agreement. They were just like the Council. They didn't care about the girl who had been burned. They cared about the crown so she could win them. She is not a tool, Jack said, his voice low. She is a useful pawn, Vance corrected sharply. Do not mistake your luck for importance. Thorne, you are the delivery boy. You delivered the package. Now step aside and let the adults run the war. Jack moved. It was not a soldier's move. It was a brawler's move. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. Vance reached for his sidearm, but he was too slow. Jack's fist connected with the general's jaw with a sickening crack. Vance crumbled, hitting the floor hard. The diplomats scrambled back, shouting for the guards. Jack stood over the general, shaking his hand out. I'm not a delivery boy. Jack snarled at the room. And she isn't a pawn. She's the woman who can melt your brain with a thought. So I suggest you show some respect. The door burst open. A squad of Marines rushed in, weapons raised. Stand down! Larina's voice rang out. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that vibrated in the teeth of every man in the room. She stood up. The air around her shimmered with violet energy. The Marines froze, their instincts screaming that the woman in the flight suit was the most dangerous thing on the station. Lyrina looked down at Vance, who was groaning and clutching his jaw. Then she looked at the diplomats. You want me to rule, she said. You want me to take the throne my sister holds, to lead armies, to be your figurehead. It is your destiny, a terrified diplomat squeaked. My destiny was written in a lab, Lyrina said. It was to be a bridge, to love. You ask me to sacrifice the one person who taught me what that word means so I can wear a crown of cold iron. She walked over to Jack. She took his bruised hand in hers. She looked at him, and the cold, regal mask melted away, leaving only the girl who had danced in the rain on Cradle 6. If I have to rule without love, Larina declared, her voice echoing in the silence, then I choose exile. She looked at the Marines. We are leaving. Anyone who tries to stop us will learn why the Council fears me. The Marines lowered their weapons. They stepped aside. Jack and Larina walked out of the conference room, leaving the stunned politicians and the bleeding general in their wake. They didn't look back. They ran. This time, they ran from everyone. The Council wanted them dead. The Terran Coalition wanted them imprisoned. The cartels wanted the bounty. There was no safe harbor, no friendly port. They pushed the vagabond to its breaking point, making blind jumps through unstable wormholes, burning out the hyperdrive coils to put light years between them and the rest of the universe. They needed a place that wasn't on any map. Jack found it in the navigation logs of a dead surveyor probe he had salvaged years ago. Sector 7G, a blue marble orbiting a dying white dwarf star. No strategic value, no minerals, just water. They landed on a small archipelago, a chain of green islands floating in an endless turquoise ocean. The air was sweet and salty. The gravity was light. There were no neon signs, no burning compounds, no marble palaces. For the first time in weeks, silence fell. They hid the ship in a limestone cavern and set up a camp on the beach. For 7 days, the galaxy left them alone. It was a strange, feverish peace. They lived like castaways. Jack fished with a spear he fashioned from a strut of the ship. Lorena learned to cook over an open fire, laughing when she burned the fish, her face smeared with charcoal. They swam in the warm, bioluminescent waters at night, the ocean glowing around them like liquid stars. The trauma of the last month began to unspool. Lorena stopped flinching at sudden noises, the tension in Jack's shoulders, a knot he had carried since the war, finally loosened. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of purple and gold, they sat on the driftwood logs by their fire. Lorena was braiding a piece of seagrass. She looked at Jack, who was turning a small metal object in his hands. "It is quiet here," she whispered. "I keep waiting for the alarms, for the fire." "No fire," Jack said. "Not here." He looked down at the object. It was a simple square of titanium plate, cut from the hull of the Vagabond. He had spent the afternoon polishing it with sand until it shone like silver. He had used his laser cutter to etch words into the surface. The heat had turned the lettering a deep, iridescent blue. "I don't have a ring," Jack said, his voice thick. He felt suddenly nervous, more terrified than he had been facing the assassins. "I don't have a kingdom to offer you, Lyra. I have a broken ship, a bounty on my head, and a scar that matches yours." He held out the plate. Lorena took it. Her fingers traced the warm metal. She read the words etched there. "Mine, if you'll have me." It wasn't a question of ownership. She knew that now. It was the answer to the question she had asked in the dark of the cargo bay. "Take me." It was an acceptance of her broken parts, her defect, her terrifying power. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over and tracking down the scars on her cheek. She looked at him, and for the first time in her life, the hole in her chest, the void where her family should have been, was filled. "I have never had a home," she whispered. "I thought home was a place, a planet, a palace." She moved off the log, kneeling in the sand between his legs, looking up at him. "You are my home, Jack," she said. "You are the only ground I have ever stood on." She pressed the metal plate to her heart. "Yours, always." Jack leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, tasting of salt and smoke. There was no desperation in it this time, only a deep, abiding gratitude. They lay back on the sand, the fire crackling beside them, and watched the alien constellations spin overhead. For one night, they were not fugitives. They were just a man and a woman who had found the impossible at the end of the universe. The morning brought the shadow. It started as a vibration in the sand. Then, the birds in the jungle went silent. The sky, which had been a perfect cloudless azure, darkened. Jack was awake instantly. He was on his feet, scanning the horizon, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Jack?" Lorena murmured, stirring from the furs. "Get to the ship," he said, his voice flat and cold. The clouds parted. They weren't clouds. They were ships. A massive fleet descended from the upper atmosphere. They were sleek, white destroyers, gold-trimmed and terrifying, council warships. And flanked by them, looking darker and more industrial, were Terran cruisers. The enemies had united. Their mutual fear of what Lorena represented, of the chaos she caused, had brought the empires together. A holographic projection beamed down from the lead flagship, a colossal dreadnought that blocked out the sun. It materialized on the beach, a giant shimmering figure of a high council executor. "Jack Thorne!" the voice boomed, shaking the palm trees. "Specimen Zeta, there is nowhere left to run." Lyrena stood up, the sand falling from her legs. She stood beside Jack, her chin high. She reached for his hand. "We surrender to no one," she shouted at the sky. "There is no surrender," the executor replied. "Only a transaction. We have a proposition for the Terran." The image shifted. It showed Earth, a live feed. A massive council fleet was parked in orbit around the blue planet, their weapons charged and aimed at the continents below. "We do not wish to destroy the cradle of humanity," the executor said smoothly. "But we will, to excise this cancer. The deal is simple. Jack Thorne, you will board our shuttle. You will leave. You will go into exile alone, and we will spare your homeworld. If you refuse, if you attempt to fight, we will turn Earth into glass before you can clear the atmosphere. And then we will take the girl anyway." Jack stared at the image of Earth. He saw the targeting reticles over North America, over Europe, billions of lives, his home, the place he had fought for, scavenged for, and tried to forget. He felt Lorena's hand tighten on his. "No," she whispered. "Jack, no. Do not listen. We fight. We die together." "If we fight," Jack said, his voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance, "everyone dies. My people. Your legacy. It all burns." "I do not care," she screamed, grabbing his face. "Let it burn. I choose you. I choose us." Jack looked at her. He looked at the scar he had saved from the fire. He looked at the perfect eye that saw him as a prince. He loved her enough to die for her. But did he love her enough to let her live? He knew what they would do to her. They wouldn't kill her. They would put the leash back on. They would lock her in a vault. They would study her. But she would be alive, and Earth would be safe. But Jack Thorne was a scavenger. He knew how to spot a trap, and he knew how to rig one. He stepped away from her. "Jack," she breathed, terror flooding her face. "I can't let them burn the Earth, Lyra," he said. He forced his face to be stone. He forced the soldier back into control. "You promised," she sobbed. "You said I was yours." "And you are," he said. "But I have to do this." He looked up at the projection. "I accept." "Excellent," the executor said. "A shuttle is inbound." A small white transport pod descended from the dreadnought, landing on the sand 100 yards away. The ramp lowered. "Jack, please," Lorena begged, falling to her knees in the sand. She reached for him, but she didn't use her power. She wouldn't use it on him. She just wept. "Do not leave me." He knelt fast, grabbing her shoulders. He kissed her forehead hard. Then he leaned to her ear. "Trust me," he whispered, so low the audio sensors of the ships couldn't pick it up. "I'm not leaving." He stood up. He turned his back on her, wailing. He walked toward the shuttle. He was wearing his old flight jacket. Inside the lining, pressed against his ribs, was the power core of the Vagabond. He had rigged it days ago, a fail-safe in case they were captured. It was a compact fusion drive, modified to overload. A thermal charge with the yield of a tactical nuke. He wasn't going into exile. He was going to the flagship. He was going to get on the bridge, look the executor in the eye, and blow the heart of the fleet to hell. He walked up the ramp of the shuttle. He paused at the top and looked back. Lyrina was a small figure on the vast beach, kneeling in the sand, her head bowed in defeat. He tapped his comms bead, opening a private channel to her. "One last time. I'd burn the whole galaxy for you, firecracker," he whispered. He stepped inside. The ramp closed. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Jack Thorne toward the blockade, toward the waiting dreadnought, and toward the end of his life. On the beach, Lyrina screamed his name, a sound of pure heartbreak that was lost in the roar of the engines. But as the shuttle broke the atmosphere, something in her snapped. She felt his intent. Through the bond, through the defect, she felt the bomb. She felt his goodbye. "No," she whispered, standing up. The sand around her began to rise, swirling in a vortex. Her eyes glowed with a blinding violet light. "No!" The shuttle docked with a jolt. The sterile white interior of the Council dreadnought, the Inheritor's will, flooding Jack's vision. The instant the ramp lowered, he was swarmed. He didn't even see the first blow. A stun baton to the kidney dropped him, and before he could even register the pain, they were on him, ripping the flight jacket from his body. "Fusion core, just as you predicted. Executor," a guard's metallic voice said. Jack's stomach turned to ice. They had known. The entire offer had been a trap to disarm him. A cold, gaunt Corinthian in the black robes of an executor stepped from the shadows. His face was a landscape of ancient, arrogant wrinkles. "Did you truly believe, Terran," the executor hissed, "that we could not smell your pathetic, suicidal intent? You reek of desperation. It is a signature of your entire species." He backhanded Jack across the face. "Take him to interrogation and keep him alive. I want the hybrid to watch. I want her to see her loyalty fixation dismantled piece by piece." Pain became Jack's entire world. They displayed him in a high-energy containment field, naked to the waist, his arms chained above his head. For hours, they worked on him. They used neural destabilizers that felt like his nerves were being set on fire, one by one. They used sonic resonators that vibrated his bones until he thought his skeleton would shatter. And through it all, a holographic camera broadcast his agony. On the ocean planet, the Vagabond was a prison. Lyrina sat in the cockpit, forced to watch the feed on the main console. She saw every blow. She heard every choked-off scream. They were broadcasting it on all channels, a brutal message to the galaxy. This is what happens to those who defy the bloodline. This is the fate of the Terran who dared to touch a princess. She watched Jack's defiant scowl turn into a bloody mask. She saw them break his ribs, but he did not beg, he did not plead. His eyes, when he could open them, were still fixed on the camera. He was looking at her. And in that gaze, she saw not defeat, but a single burning command. Live. But the girl who had been Specimen Zeta, the one who wept on the beach, was gone. The fire that had forged her, the love that had defined her, had now hardened into something unbreakable. The defect was not a weakness. It was a core of pure unalloy. The executor's voice filled her cockpit. "You see, Specimen? Your Terran flaw is his undoing. He is weak, emotional. He dies for a futile gesture. Now, come. Surrender yourself and we will grant him a quick death." Lyrina looked at the screen. She saw Jack, bloody and broken, lift his head one last time. He spat a mouthful of blood at the camera. She cut the feed. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. She stood up. She was no longer just a hybrid. She was a queen. She was a Terran. She was a warrior. "Sal," she said, her voice a flat, cold whisper. The Vagabond's dry, dispassionate AI, which had been silent, flickered to life. "Affirmative, Lyrina." Jack's upload from Ariax Prime. Did it include all the files, even the encrypted ones? He initiated a full system dump. The Project Unity file was merely the cover sheet. The drive contains the entire genetic history of the Council of Inheritors. 2,000 years of purges, assassinations, and failed hybrid projects. There are millions. Lorena's eyes glowed with a faint violet light. Millions. Millions more like her. Discarded. Hunted. Broken. Plot a course. Sal, Cradle 6. Send a single encrypted message to the archivist. Tell them, the Mother of Unity is calling her children home. While Lorena raced toward the neutral zone, the galaxy Jack had ignited began to truly burn. The Terran coalition, humiliated by the Council's blockade of Earth, finally acted. General Vance, his jaw wired shut, had been overruled. The Terran moon defense systems, a network of ancient, powerful railguns left over from the First War, activated. They fired warning shots across the bow of the Council blockade, a clear signal. Earth was no longer neutral. Simultaneously, a global network of Terran hackers, incensed by the torture of a man they now considered a folk hero, released the rest of the data, all of it. The Council's genetic secrets, their purges, their imperfects. The truth flooded the networks. Uprisings were no longer protests. They were revolutions. Hybrid-born, outcasts, and forgotten races rose up on 100 worlds. They had been the galaxy's worthless, its defects. Now, they had a name. They had a symbol. They had a mother. When Lorena arrived at Cradle 6, the outlaw station was already hers. A fleet of ships, patched-together freighters, old warships, and stolen diplomatic craft surrounded the station. They had come from every dark corner of the galaxy. They were the half-breeds, the slaves, the cast-offs. They were the ones who, like her, had been told they were flawed. She stood on the bridge of a stolen Corinthian cruiser, its command systems rewired to her will. She broadcast her message to the makeshift fleet. "They call us defects." Her voice rang out, her scarred, beautiful face displayed on 1,000 screens. "They call us imperfect. They call our loyalty a flaw and our love a weakness. They are wrong. We are the children of two worlds. We are the bridge they tried to burn. But we are still standing." She looked into the camera, and her gaze was not that of a diplomat. It was the gaze of a predator. "The Council of Inheritors has my Jack. They hold the man who taught me that worthless is a lie. They believe they have won." She raised her fist, and a million voices roared back at her. "They have only taught us how to fight. We are the broken who love, and we are going to get him back." The fleet, her fleet, the broken who love, tore a hole in hyperspace, aiming for one target, the Terran system, and the Council dreadnought, the Inheritor's will. Jack was floating in a red haze of pain when he heard the alarms. They were distant, at first, then shrieking. The executor was in his cell, his face a mask of disbelief. "A fleet," the executor spat. "A fleet of garbage! She dares!" He activated the cell's broadcast screen. The sight that met Jack's eyes made him forget the pain. A massive, chaotic, beautiful fleet of ships was tearing into the Council blockade. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but they fought with a suicidal, righteous fury. At their head was a Corinthian cruiser, painted black, flying straight for the dreadnought, its weapons blazing. And on the Terran moon, the defense grid opened up, not at Lorena's fleet, but at the Council ships. The Terrans had chosen their side. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Jack coughed, a bloody laugh escaping him. "My firecracker. You disabled the bomb," the executor whispered, his eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. He had been playing. "You knew she would come. You You let us capture you. You turned yourself into bait. Jack smiled, his split lips cracking. I never liked that jacket anyway. The executor screamed in rage and raised a plasma rod to end Jack's life. You will not see her victory. No, a voice said. The cell door exploded inward. A squad of Arconian bounty hunters, the same ones from Cradle 6, stormed the room. They gunned down the executor's guards. Their leader stepped over the bodies and looked at the stunned executor. The archivist sends his regards, the Arconian hissed. The price on your head, executor, just exceeded the price on hers. He fired once. The Arconian turned to Jack and used a plasma cutter to slice through his chains. Why? Jack grunted, slumping to the floor. The Mother of Unity pays in truth, the Arconian said, hauling Jack to his feet. The galaxy is remaking itself and we chose the winning side. The battle was a firestorm. Lyrina's ship, the Retribution, slammed into the side of the Inheritor's will, her telekinetic power ripping a hole in its hull. She was leading a boarding party, her face a mask of cold fury, a plasma rifle in her hands. She moved like a ghost, her Corinthian combat training and her human rage a perfect lethal combination. She found Jack on the lower decks, surrounded by his Arconian saviors, a pistol in his hand. They stopped, 10 feet apart. The battle raged around them, a symphony of explosions and screaming metal. They didn't move. He was a wreck, bloody bruised, his left eye swollen shut. You look like hell, scavenger, she said, her voice shaking. You're late, he replied, his one good eye drinking her in. She crossed the distance in a second, crashing into him. It was not a gentle reunion. It was a collision. She kissed him, hard, tasting his blood, her armor clattering against him. He held her, his arms like steel bands, never intending to let her go again. The bridge, she murmured against his mouth. Vailari is there. The bridge of the Inheritor's will was a tomb. Princess Vailari stood by the main viewport watching her fleet, her perfect, pure-blooded fleet, being torn apart by an alliance of hybrids, humans, and outcasts. Her guards were dead. So, Vailari said, not turning. The defect has come to claim the throne. Lyrina stepped onto the bridge. Jack was right behind her, his pistol aimed at the princess. I am not here for the throne, Lyrina said. Vailari finally turned. Her face was perfect, as always, but her eyes were filled with a jealous, burning hatred. She looked at Jack, then at Lyrina, at the way they stood together, a matched set. You have infected her. Terran, Vailari hissed. You have taken our royal blood and dragged it through the mud. She could have been pure. She could have been me. No, Jack said. She's better. Vailari screamed and drew a concealed energy blade, lunging at Jack. Lyrina moved. She didn't fire. She didn't use her power to stop the blade. She simply stepped between them. The energy blade stopped, a millimeter from Lyrina's heart. Vailari stared, her arm trembling. She had been prepared to kill the pet. But to kill her own blood, her own reflection. Lyrina reached out and gently, with her scarred hand, touched Vailari's cheek. You are just like me, Lyrina whispered, her voice filled with a profound, aching sadness. You were born in a lab too, weren't you? You're just another copy, another perfect experiment. And you are so very, very alone. Vailari's cold mask shattered. Lyrina had seen the truth. Vailari was not the original. She was just the one who had passed the test, the one who had successfully buried her flaws. We were not born to rule Vailari, Lyrina said, her voice soft, but echoing with the power that had united a galaxy. We were born to love. She took the energy blade from her half-sister's unresisting hand. Go, run, find a life that is yours. The reign of the pure bloods is over. Vailari stared at her, tears of pure, uncomprehending shock welling in her eyes. She looked at Jack, at the defect that had just shown her mercy. Then, for the first time in her life, the princess, the experiment, turned and ran. Jack and Lorena stood on the bridge, hand in hand, and watched the end of an empire. The return to Earth was not a quiet one. They were not fugitives. They were heroes. A parade, miles long, wound through the rebuilt streets of New Vegas, the desert sun gleaming on the cheering crowds. Jack Thorne, the scavenger who had left this world in disgrace, had returned as its savior, and beside him stood Lorena, the mother of unity. Her scars were not hidden. They were celebrated. She was the symbol of a new galaxy, one not defined by purity but by connection. They stood on a high balcony, waving to the crowds. Above them, the sky flickered. Dozens of ships from a dozen different races hung in the upper atmosphere. They were not a blockade. They were an honor guard. One by one, they dipped their bows in a silent salute, not to a planet, but to the man and woman who had saved it. Jack put his arm around Lorena's waist. "It's loud," he murmured. "I like it," she whispered back, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But I preferred our island." "Me too." The crowds roared. The ships held their salute, far from the city, in a quiet green field where the red desert sand finally gave way to life. A small child was running. She was laughing, chasing a butterfly. She had her father's Terran features, his stubborn jaw, his wild hair. But when she looked up at the sky, at the ship saluting her parents, her eyes glowed with a faint, beautiful sapphire light. He saved a worthless alien princess from the fire. Now every empire bows to planet Earth.